and that is Building Digital Community, chat reference as virtual volunteer social practice by Andrea Marshall, an artist, librarian, and researcher in New Jersey who is currently an online reference volunteer for Answerland, a dynamic and innovative service of Oregon State Libraries. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here today. And I'd also like to thank our colleague Bill Jones for basically rebuilding my PowerPoint presentation and helping with my presentation today. So thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. So my presentation is Building Digital Community, and I've been a chat reference volunteer with Answerland and Oregon State Libraries for about 2 years now. And this is sort of a discussion of some of the things I found in the last couple of years that really spoke to me about being an online volunteer and the social practices and community building that took place as a result, and that I witnessed as I volunteered. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one thing that I noticed is that, like this quote says, for librarians to continually demonstrate superior and high quality service, they must meet the needs of both current and potential users. In that regard, potential users and current users can often vary in granularity, scope, and need. And information seeking in a digital platform, in digital environments, varies greatly in terms of what populations are being served, what sort of information needs manifest in the day-to-day, and also in terms of potential users, we still, even in the digital realm, do rely on sort of memes and ideas to transfer from person to person and patron to patron with using our service, getting to know our services, and then sort of understanding how we can contribute to knowledge building. Next slide, please. Thank you. Brown, in her work, observes how do we work from home, remotely, in isolation, with variable computer access. Beg your pardon? Our provost suggested we work on all those things we do not usually have time for during the daily routine. One of those things is to think comprehensively and deeply about how and why we do our work. Reflective journaling and communities of practice are useful, but usually low on the priority list of librarians. Though Brown is wryly observing this from the perspective of an academic librarian, in all sorts of librarianship, we are busy. We are constantly trying to be both information sleuths and canny readers of human behavior. We're also information processing, and we're also collecting, collaborating, and sort of collating all these things at once in synthesis, which is why it's really special what librarians do and why we do what we do. In terms of being remote and in isolation, with the advent of the pandemic, I found when I began my experience as an online reference volunteer that I was regaining the community I had lost due to pandemic at the beginning of 2020 when I was laid off, like many of our colleagues in librarianship, from an academic library that I had served for 3 years prior because of the pandemic. And there was widespread staff layoffs, and I felt that I needed to sort of rededicate myself to librarianship. And I was looking for ways to understand sort of what I could contribute in a digital realm. And one of the things I discovered at Answerland, where I serve particularly, is that we serve actually a global consortium. So in that regard, we serve all the United States, and we have partnerships with so many libraries across the globe that we actually have so many variations in community and variations in our patron bases that there's always opportunities for growth and even a little reflective journaling from time to time. Next slide, please. Thank you. And one of the things I discovered through my work with Answerland is that creativity builds sensitivity. So this includes sensitivity to like diverse perspectives, practices, and interests, sensitivity to thinking outside of the box, and innovating in the moment, on the fly. So like many librarians, I'm constantly ad-libbing, I'm constantly innovating, I'm constantly collaborating. And additionally, creativity When paired with sensitivity, it creates opportunities for librarians to co-construct dynamic processes with patrons in terms of shared goal setting and what I'm going to call cooperative information seeking, because it's not just a one-way street, right? It's basically we're creating dynamic feedback loops that then generate new knowledge, understanding, and community. Next slide, please. Beyond that, collaboration also builds community, and collaboration also builds innovation. It creates organic processes during information seeking with patrons, as I've just observed. Collaboration also generates reference interviews where questions become opportunities for creative brainstorming with patrons. Because one thing that librarians do very, very well is we can get to the heart of the matter, even if we have to ask, however many questions or make however many observations with our patrons in order to get there. And because we are sort of on a discovery mission with our patrons, we interact with them as allies and co-discoverers of information and co-constructors of these processes, rather than the sage on the stage. We're sort of the guide on the side. We're right alongside them, working towards finding out what they'd like to know and what else they need to know. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to expand my previous points by saying that collaboration with fellow volunteers, staff, and patrons in Answerland, for me, has built communal knowledge infrastructures that are adaptable and porous, constantly updated. And in that way, just like Hurley and Warner observe, in many ways, proactive chat is an entirely new service, using new technologies to reach new patrons to offer our assistance and expertise. We must not assume that this is reference as we have come to know it. We have the opportunity to change our expectations for how we interact with patrons. We should seize it. And really, in Answerland, we seize opportunities through community building, through questions that lead to sort of new discoveries about how information is being siloed, how information is being processed by ourselves and by patrons, and how our information is crucial to all sorts of communities. Next slide, please. Swaren and Smith, in their very recent publication, Exploring New Narratives to Overcome Historical Assumptions, they made an observation about the pandemic and said, as the pandemic continues, it is important and necessary for libraries to reflect upon how altered responses might better fill students' needs and wishes. Libraries must explore how they can further adapt to the pandemic-altered landscape, with the added benefit of time, information, and hindsight. Long-held assumptions about user needs and preferences that inform decision-making can be challenged. This work allows libraries to envision unconsidered possibilities and patrons a chance to do better. And as I've sort of observed throughout my presentation, there is constant, as they say, challenging, long-held assumptions about user needs, long-held beliefs about information seeking, long-held assumptions about what is the role of the librarian in the information process and in the creation of new information as well, and how the information is siloed, classified, categorized, how it is building infrastructures that can lend communities and individuals really generative, creative, and sensitive perspectives that they maybe hadn't thought of before. And next slide, please. And the question is, too, how does Answerland build a creative community where virtual volunteering is a social practice? So what I discovered is that through virtual volunteering, it is a social practice because you are collaborating, communicating, and cooperating with others in a dynamic way, because you're brainstorming for new ways to connect with patrons. You're also brainstorming with patrons in dynamic ways. You're collaborating. We have collaborative social meetings that create new opportunities to meet fellow volunteers all over the US and for us to communicate ideas for ways to learn new methods to co-geek with staff, if you'll pardon the term, about practices and procedures that support cutting-edge reference work in the digital environment of Answerland. And so a lot of these ideas also lead to opportunities for professional development that include online webinars of varied topics, asynchronous learning modules, and asking volunteers actually what skill building and topics they'd like to engage with going forward. So we are active members of a community that constantly allows us to contribute and sort of interact with not only one another, but with patrons in ways that are then seen as generative, that are then seen as creative and innovative. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I want to thank Jennifer Cox, our reference coordinator at Answerland, Oregon State Library, and Courtney Camp Amabile, volunteer and operations coordinator at Oregon State Library, for beginning the conversations and the collaborations that led to my interest in creating this project. If anyone is interested in volunteering with us, please check the link below. And we are currently seeking volunteers to work with our Spanish language queue, but we always welcome folks from all over to contribute to our community. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Please let me know if you have any questions.
All right, and thank you very much for that presentation. That was really insightful and interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
If anyone does have any questions, just throw them in the Q&A. I'm not seeing any at the moment, but we can give folks a couple of minutes to put them in there. While we wait for people to do that, I'll just make my regular announcement that all of these presentations today are being recorded, and those recordings and slide decks and everything will be shared with all registrants after the conference in the week or two following. So just
thank you so much, Cam. Sorry to interrupt. It's like
yeah, agreed. Great job.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, we do have a question in the Q&A. Do you plan to monetize this service in the future?
That's a really great question. At the moment, I can't speak as an expert on that since I'm a volunteer, not a staff member. In terms of monetization, do you mean compensation for staff in terms of paid work opportunities, or do you mean that it will be monetized fully? We are free since librarians, and we believe, information should be free. So as far as I can discern, this is free, and we're proud of that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. How many hours do volunteers work?
Thank you to Cam for the follow-up too. That's a really great question. Volunteers can work up to it varies greatly is my sense. For example, I have 2 hours during the week that are certain and just for me, and 2 hours per week is the minimum commitment, as Cam said. But you can always improve it, expand on it. And what's really great is that our community is really flexible about meeting the needs of their volunteers and those folks that we collaborate with. So there's always a variation, a lot of granularity, and a lot of opportunity for being flexible. Thank you for your questions.
All right, next question, or not a question, but this person will chime in. Answerland serves academic, public, school, law, and special libraries. Oh, thank you. Another question, where are the questions coming from? Geography, academic, general public?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for that question. We serve all sorts of communities. So we have a public queue, we have an academic queue, and within our consortium, we have varied libraries. And I would say that one of the things I really like about volunteering with Answerland is that the opportunities to practice your reference skills in all sorts of contexts are really just sort of endless, because we're getting all sorts of questions from all sorts of angles and all sorts of I beg your pardon, perspectives too, and all ages too. I would say it's intergenerational.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
We have I think going back to the previous question, just some more clarification too. I see. It depends. We have different opportunities for service. We have volunteers who serve as mentors, and we have a quality team. Nice.
That's right.
Another question. Since your work is global, do volunteers speak more than one language?
That's an excellent question. And I will just take this opportunity to mention that we do, and we would welcome volunteers for our Spanish language queue. And we do have volunteers that are multilingual, and there are opportunities for many skill sets to be deployed in the context of our community. And my colleague Cam has mentioned some, I've mentioned some. That's just the beginning, however.
Okay. Next question. How would you say Answerland librarians work differently, if they do, from working with patrons and other library chat services?
That's a really great question. Thank you for that. Because there is a lot of, you know, I'm not going to be splitting hairs with this, but I would say I think we work a little differently because there's an understanding that we're not, one size does not fit all in terms of skill set, patron assistance, reference interviews, or information seeking. And because so in that regard, I think there's another opportunity too to contribute to how Answerland functions from, I would say, the very fundamentals of reference and what reference is, to building community together. So in this regard, I can speak to that as I've just joined the mentoring community there. And right now, my colleague Cam and I and another librarian, Amanda, are working to revitalize, revamp, and kind of rethink about what mentoring is when we welcome new librarians to our service and to our community. So there's always opportunity for growth, and there's always and I think that one of the things I really like about Answerland too is there's an opportunity for I've seen it called slow librarianship, for thoughtful, sort of mindful and engaged community building as information seeking, which is really, I think, unique for me, at least. This is, now we're going back to the dinosaur era, but when I first began as a librarian, I volunteered with the Internet Public Library, which is no longer with us, sadly, is now defunct. And that was email-based reference, because chat reference at that time was just gaining traction, I think, around mid-2000s. And one thing I remember is that the volunteers and I and the other staff would sit around and sort of meditate on the questions of the week that we thought had, really practiced our skills and sort of challenged our thinking about whether it was the topic or how we conveyed perspectives, how we decided, what is an authoritative resource that we can recommend, and also what it means to meet with user needs and community. And so that was the beginning of my journey with that. In Answerland, I find that continues on all those levels. So I find that to be very unique and really valuable.
Thank you. Are institutions paying Answerland to have your chat widget at their institutions?
That's a great question. I actually, because we're all information geeks here, and I'm co-geeking with all of you as we do this, I'm going to allow my colleague Cam to speak to that, because unfortunately I don't know the answer to that. I do apologize. Cam, if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, if your colleague is, answering in the chat or something, I'll go to the next question, then go back to that.
Sure. Thank you.
Are there other states that have similar collaborative services for academic, public, school, law, and special libraries?
That's a really great question. Thank you for that. So the now defunct Internet Public Library was one of them. I can speak to you about the state of New Jersey. Up until maybe a decade ago, we had a service called, it was chat reference. It was called Q&A New Jersey, and it was a consortium of libraries. And and it was really dynamic because there were two queues. One was public and the other was academic. And Cam, so sorry, colleague Cam, Courtney is her name. And absolutely, if Cam would like to speak for a bit, she's welcome to. Q&A, thank you, Laura. Q&A New Jersey was awesome. And a million years ago, I was on a virtual reference committee more than once where we actually, thank you, Laura, for clarifying. It ran 2001 to 2011. Thank you. So thanks to Laura as well. There were virtual reference committees that I remember serving on a couple of times with fellow librarians in New Jersey. And there were two instances where we did kind of focus group community building. And then we went out and sort of did discovery work about other similar services in other states. And as far as I can remember, there are multiple states that have chat and email-based reference services that are free to the public. I remember it from, I mean, it's been a while, and thank you to Laura for the timeline, because it was only there for 10 years, but it was really great.
Yeah, I agree. I got my master's in Rutgers, and I remember the days of Q&A and NJ, and it was
oh
really,
my goodness.
really
Oh, fellow alumna.
Oh yeah.
Here we go. Yep.
Yeah, I see.
I'm with you.
Someone mentioned Minnesota has a chat service like this, which a link was included in the chat.
And Q&A New Jersey did end to a lack of state funding. We could never find a good solution, as I recall, to replacing it. Thank you, Laura, for the clarification.
And let's see, another question. Do you have a special, oh, excuse me. Oh, I thought I cut you off. Okay. Do you have a special website with free resources that you use to answer your patrons' questions?
That's a wonderful question. The answer is I use the internet. And that's a glib response, right? But all respectfully, I answer you in the utmost respect. I think it's I try to use free resources to answer patrons, because obviously when you convey the information, they want it to be accessible, don't they? And so, say in the public queues, it can run the gamut. In the academic queues, I often go to, this is just my perspective, I often go to Google Scholar, because what they'll do is, they have what they call in computer science scrapable data. So like the preprint publications, white papers, a lot of gray literature is accessible through Google Scholar in times where there would be maybe a paywall because of bibliographic barriers, like journals or other publications that might be locked again behind a paywall or an institutional barrier. I try to take down those boundaries as an information geek, if I can, and as a librarian and a conscientious practitioner of information should be free. So when I, do specifically folks that are in the academic queues who are doing research, I often go to Bing or Google Scholar or even ResearchGate and other social networking sites where scholars often have their work available for free. Thank you.
Okay, another question. Do volunteers get access to State Library of Oregon resources during their shifts, or do they only use free reference sources?
That's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. We have access to all of the Oregon State Library's resources in order to answer questions and to better serve our patrons.
Okay, another question. I guess, how do you deal with copyrighted material?
That's a wonderful question. If it's someone say, I need, if a student shows up and says, hi, I need this book, which has happened so many times, what we'll do is, if I can find it through Oregon State Libraries, I will recommend it, and it's freely accessible to the public. I will recommend it that way. If it's a concern about copyrighted materials, where there's often an institutional barrier, a paywall, or some other kind of barrier or boundary that's not for that student in particular, or for myself, I can't traverse it. What I'll do is, often I will find other resources that are freely available if I must propose something that's an alternative. And sometimes that helps. Other times patrons want what they came for, as the case may be, the original work. And often I will have to explain and say, I'm sorry, but that has a barrier, a boundary. And then I'll
Okay.
suggest ways that they might traverse it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, great. Thank you. I believe your colleague Cam was going to chime in on an earlier question, and we just got a mic enabled.
Oh, great.
So
Oh,
Cam, if you would
good.
like to chime in, feel free.
Oh,
Sure,
thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for representing us here today, Andy. And
My pleasure.
the only thing that I have to chime in that I haven't added into the chat is that
So
when students come to us, or when anyone comes to us for copyrighted material, we also have some access to local libraries backends as well, so we can see what they are what they have access to from their local library. So if they have a specific database that they can find that particular resource on, we can actually link them back to their home library, which creates this better and more robust network of local libraries partnering with us.
That's really great. Thank you. And it looks like we do have two more questions in the Q&A.
Sure.
One is, have there been a shift in the types of questions during pandemic versus non-pandemic?
Yes, I think so. I can't say that. I will say the one thing that I notice is a constant question about in the public queues where I started. And thank you, Jennifer. Oh, hi, Jennifer. Okay, Jennifer's here too. That would be great. Yeah, I'll just say really quickly, and then Jennifer and Cam, of course, can chime in as needed too, which would be very welcome. That we've gotten a lot of questions about in the academic queue. Sorry, is the library open? Or I can't get in the library. Or do you want to answer me? There's nobody there. I went there to get my file. I went there to get my materials, and nobody wants to help me. That I see a lot, or I was seeing more now that things are starting to be more. Campuses are reopening very gradually, in very parts of the country. In the public queues, it's are you open? When are you open? Please, I need a book. When are you open? Please, I need a DVD. When are you open? There was a lot of that, and also I came and no one was there. Because personnel hours, interacting with communities, it's so varied, and the pandemic has created so many opportunities and new ways for us to serve and new challenges for the patrons as well. And if Jennifer and Cam want to chime in, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll chime in just for a second. Good afternoon, all. I'm the Answerland coordinator, and it's definitely been a way for many libraries to innovate during the pandemic. I report directly to our state library board, as well as we are basically 100% federally funded from an LSTA grant. So from that standpoint, just to let you know about kind of the ways that people are innovating during the pandemic, especially during lockdown times. This service has been used a lot for curbside service. When libraries didn't have infrastructure, this was a way to direct everyone to kind of one place. Sometimes directing them to multiple places became scattered, and we have many rural areas where internet access is pretty strained. So for them to actually be able to pull up to the library, connect to the library's internet, and then send a message, that's a big deal. I think sometimes we don't realize that outside of metro areas, that can really be a challenge for them to be able to pull up, have access right outside the library, and then be able to say, hey, I'm here to pick up my holds. That's been game changing. We use the Spring Share service, and during the pandemic, they also enabled finally screen sharing, so we can screen share with a patron. We can see what they're seeing, and you have to be a little bit careful with it, but it also can open a Zoom session for you, so you can actually interface visually with a person, and I've found that some people really like that, and that's been really great as far from as far as like maybe a mental health standpoint too, that some people want to connect that way. Anyway, I will mute now.
Well said.
Great. Thank you very much. It's time to move on. There's one unanswered question, so I will forward that to you, Andy, and you can address that, and we'll share that answer out post-conference. And just, thank you very much for that great presentation. And great discussion and questioning and answering, and for a conference today about collaboration. It's seeing live collaboration happening in front of us.
Thanks to my colleagues for joining
thanks
me
to
too,
you
and
and everyone for that.
Thank you so much. And thanks for allowing my colleagues to join me. Thank you.